The twin suns of Valyria burned high in the sky, casting golden light across the vast capital of the Zayari Empire. Towers of crystal and steel reached into the clouds, their tips glowing like flames. Thousands of citizens gathered in the great arena at the heart of the city. The air was alive with cheers, drums, and the low hum of alien instruments that carried deep into the chest of every listener. It was a day of celebration. The Empire had won yet another border war against a rival species, and the champion of their people, the warrior princess Kalyra, stood before them. She was tall, towering above most, her skin shimmering with faint silver patterns that glowed when the sunlight touched them. Her eyes, sharp and violet, carried the weight of both. Command and challenge, Kalyra was no ordinary princess. From the time she could walk, she had been trained as a soldier, and by the time she came of age, she had already defeated seasoned warlords. On the battlefield, she was a storm. No blade had ever pierced her defenses, no warrior had ever forced her to kneel. She had become a living legend, admired even by her enemies. The people roared her name as she raised her hand. The sound rolled like thunder, shaking the walls of the arena. She let them cheer, let them feel pride in her strength. And then, with a smile, she spoke. Her voice carried across the arena by the amplifiers woven into the air. "My people," she said, "today we celebrate victory. Another rival has fallen before the might of our empire, and once again I have proven that no warrior alive can match the blood of Zayari." The crowd erupted again, chants echoing through the air. But Kalyra raised her hand once more, silencing them with ease. Her smile widened, but this time it carried a spark of mischief. "And yet," she continued, "I grow weary. For years, I have faced challengers from every world, and none have given me a battle worth remembering. Giants, cyborgs, mercenaries, all of them fall. None can stand." She laughed, the sound sharp and confident. "Perhaps there is no one in this galaxy who can defeat me," the crowd murmured. They had heard such words from her before, but what followed would become the spark of legend. "Very well," Kalyra declared, her voice ringing like steel. "Let my words carry across the stars. If there is a human alive, yes, one of those fragile creatures from the outer colonies, who can defeat me in combat, I will honor him. I will marry him." The arena gasped. The laughter that followed was overwhelming. Her warriors roared with amusement, the citizens howled with delight. To them it was a joke, an impossible promise. Humans were weak compared to the Zayari. They were shorter, slower, and their bones broke easily. The idea that one could stand against Kalyra, much less defeat her, was laughable. Kalyra laughed as well, throwing her head back. "Let the message spread," she said. "Let every human hear my vow. I will face any who dare step forward, and I promise you, none shall prevail." From that day, her words became a story whispered across trade routes and colonies. The spreading. Rumor far away on human worlds scattered at the edges of space, the challenge was repeated again and again. It traveled with merchants, soldiers, and travelers who carried tales between stars. At first, humans laughed at it as the aliens had. A Zayari princess? Marry a human? Impossible. They're just mocking us. No human could ever beat one of their kind. Even their children are stronger than our soldiers. But some, instead of laughing, grew thoughtful. Humans had always been underestimated. Again and again they had survived wars against species with stronger weapons, faster ships, and harder armor. Humanity's true power was not in muscle, but in spirit, in the stubborn refusal to surrender. Among soldiers, mercenaries, and adventurers, the story grew into something more. It was no longer just a joke. It became a challenge, a call, a chance for someone to prove that humanity was not weak. Kalyra's life of glory back on Valyria. Kalyra trained every day. She sparred with generals, wrestled with armored beasts, and fought duels against the greatest champions of her empire. None lasted more than a few minutes against her. To her, the human vow was entertainment. When the first few challengers arrived, strong warriors from other alien races who claimed human bloodlines or carried human friends' encouragement, She defeated them with ease. She laughed as she sent them home, sometimes even sparing them, gifts of honor for their bravery. But though she laughed, a small spark of curiosity grew in her. She had declared the vow in jest, but part of her wondered, could there truly be a human capable of surprising her? Could there exist someone so stubborn, so fierce, that even she would struggle against them? She did not believe it was possible, but the thought stayed with her. The watching galaxy news networks across the galaxy began to broadcast her vow. It became entertainment for millions. Some watched challengers fall with excitement, others with disappointment. For humans, it became a matter of pride. Many felt insulted that Kylera mocked their species so openly. On human colonies, young men trained harder in combat arenas, dreaming of being the one to face her. Veterans from old wars whispered that perhaps one day, a soldier would rise and prove her wrong. And somewhere in the shadows of a mining colony, one such soldier was already listening. A glimpse of Ethan Cross, the mining colony of Asterion 4, was no place for dreams. The skies were filled with ash from constant drilling. The ground shook with machines that pulled minerals from the planet's core, and the air always smelled faintly of smoke. In the middle of this harsh world lived Ethan Cross, a man whose life had been shaped by war. He was not tall compared to aliens, not strong compared to cyborgs, but his body carried the marks of countless battles. Scars traced his arms, and his eyes held the steady calm of someone who had seen too much to be easily shaken. He heard the story of Kylera's vow one evening in the mess hall, where tired workers gathered after their shifts. A group of miners laughed about it, mocking the very idea of a human defeating the alien princess. But Ethan did not laugh. He simply listened, quiet, thoughtful. He had fought wars where humans had been expected to lose, and yet they had survived. He knew that strength was not always measured by size or power. That night, as he looked up at the stars through the haze of smoke, Ethan thought about the challenge. Not as a joke, not as a prize, but as something more. To him it was a chance, not for marriage, not for glory, but to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. The princess waits back on Valyria. Kylera continued her life of glory, never knowing that somewhere a human soldier had heard her words and had quietly decided, I will answer. The galaxy waited, amused and curious. They expected more challengers to come and fall. They expected laughter to continue. But what none of them expected was that soon, a human unlike any they had faced would step into the arena, and Kylera's vow, spoken in jest, would change the future of both species forever. The sky above Asterion 4 was always gray. Thick clouds of smoke drifted from the drilling towers, and the ground trembled day and night as the great machines dug deeper into the planet's crust. To most people, life here was routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, and repeat. But for Ethan Cross, every day carried the same silent weight of memories he could never put down. He was not just a miner. Before this life, before the colony, Ethan had been a soldier. Memories of war years ago when he was still young. Humanity had been pulled into one of the border wars between greater powers. Ethan had fought in battles where human soldiers were sent as expendable support for alien allies. He had seen friends fall, ships burn, and entire colonies abandoned. The galaxy called humans weak, fragile, and unimportant. But Ethan had learned something else in those wars. Humans survived. No matter how strong the enemy, no matter how unfair the fight, humans endured with a stubborn will that refused to break. That stubbornness had carried him through the war, but when it ended, he had nothing left. No home, no family, only scars on his body and silence in his heart. He took work on Asterion 4 because it was far from politics, far from armies, and far from glory. Here, he could disappear into the noise of machines. The story in the mess hall. The day Ethan first heard of Kylera's vow was like any other. The miners were gathered in the mess hall, tired from their shifts, their clothes still covered with dust. A trader had arrived that morning with supplies and gossip from other worlds. As the workers ate, the trader told them the story of Valyria's princess, of her laughter, and of the impossible challenge she had spoken before thousands. If a Human can defeat me, I will marry him. The hall erupted in laughter. Marry a human? She must have been drunk, one worker shouted. Humans can't even arm wrestle her kind, another added. They say she can crush steel with her bare hands. What chance does any of us have? The workers roared with amusement, shaking their heads at the ridiculous idea. To them, it was nothing more than a cruel joke told by aliens to make humans look small. But Ethan did not laugh. He sat quietly, at his corner table, listening with calm eyes. His spoon rested untouched in his hand, and his mind wandered back to the war. He remembered towering enemies who thought humans would break easily. He remembered battles where his unit had been left for dead, yet still managed to fight their way home. Humans were underestimated. Always. And perhaps that was why Kalira's vow stayed in his mind long after the laughter faded. The spark of a decision that night, Ethan stood outside the colony dome, staring up at the stars. The haze of smoke covered most of the sky, but he could still see a few bright points of light between the clouds. Somewhere out there was Valyria, the seat of the Zayari Empire, and the arena where Kalira fought her challengers. Her words echoed in his mind. If a human can defeat me. To others it was a joke. To him it was a challenge. Not about marriage, not about glory, but about proving something greater, that humanity was not weak, not fragile, not small, that the galaxy could laugh, but humans would rise regardless. Ethan clenched his fist. His scars ached in the cold night air. He had fought for survival before. He could fight again. For the first time in years, he felt a fire return to his chest. Quiet, steady, and unstoppable. I'll go, he whispered to the empty sky. Training. Again, Ethan's decision was not made in one night. It burned inside him slowly, like a coal that grew hotter each day. He began training again, long before anyone knew of his plan. At dawn, while the colony still slept, he ran through the ash fields outside the dome, his breath sharp in the thin air. He pushed his body until his lungs ached and his legs felt like stone. After work, instead of resting, he lifted metal scraps in the abandoned hangars, turning them into makeshift weights. He fought against simulation drones left over from old wars, sharpening his reflexes, forcing his body to remember the discipline of a soldier. The other miners noticed the change. Cross, why do you train so hard? Planning to fight the drilling machines? Ethan only gave a small smile. He never explained. His decision was his own and no one else would understand. Day after day, week after week, he prepared. His body grew stronger, leaner. His mind sharpened. He studied recordings of Kalira's battles, which were broadcast across the galaxy for entertainment. He watched the way she moved, the patterns in her strikes, the speed of her reflexes. Every opponent fought her with strength. Every one of them lost. Ethan saw what they missed. Kalira was fast and powerful, but she was also proud. She expected others to meet her strength with strength. None had tried to fight differently. None had tried to endure instead of overpower. That's where she'll fall, Ethan murmured. Not by force, but by patience. The journey begins. When the day finally came, Ethan sold what little he owned. He traded his miner's pay for passage on a merchant ship bound for the inner systems. The captain laughed when Ethan explained, his destination, you, Valyria? You'll be crushed before the match even begins, the captain said. Ethan only shrugged. Maybe, but I'll go anyway. The journey across the stars was long. Ethan spent his days in silence, training in the cargo hold, practicing strikes, footwork, and endurance. The merchants sometimes watched, shaking their heads, but they saw the quiet determination in his eyes. It was not the fire of pride or the hunger for fame. It was something deeper, harder. When the ship finally entered Valyria's system, Ethan stood at the viewport, watching. The twin suns glow above the Empire's jewel. The planet was breathtaking, covered in shining cities, crystal towers, and green plains. It was a world of strength and beauty, far from the dust and smoke of Astarion 4. "This is where it begins," he whispered. Arrival at the Arena Valeria's capital was alive with celebration when Ethan arrived. Every month, challengers came to face Princess Kalira, and every month they fell before her in the grand arena. It had become a spectacle, a tradition, something the people expected. When Ethan stepped off the transport, the crowds barely noticed him. He was just another human among thousands of travelers. To the Ziyari, he looked fragile, small, unremarkable. At the registration hall for challengers, the guards laughed openly when he placed his name. "You? A human?" one sneered. "You won't last a minute." Ethan only met their eyes calmly. "We'll see." The guard smirked, shaking his head, and wrote his name anyway. Ethan was given a small room in the challengers' quarters, where warriors from across the galaxy waited for their turns. Some were massive, covered in armor and scars. Others were cybernetic, their bodies enhanced with machines. They looked at Ethan with amusement, some even mocking him. "A human? You'll die before you touch her. Better go home while you can." But Ethan said nothing. He sat in silence, sharpening his mind, his patience. Kalira waits in her palace. Kalira trained as always. She had faced dozens of challengers since her vow, and all had fallen swiftly. To her, the matches had become routine, but when she heard that another human had entered the list, she laughed again. "Another one?" she asked her captain of guards. "Yes, Princess, he arrived today. His name is Ethan Cross." Kalira shook her head with amusement. "They never learn." "Very well. He will face me when his turn comes. I hope at least he lasts longer than the last." She thought nothing of it then. To her it was another name, another face, another laugh for the crowd. She could not have known that this human was different, that his silence carried not weakness, but a storm waiting to rise. The night, before Ethan stood on the balcony of his quarters, looking out over the shining city. Lights sparkled across the towers, and the distant sound of drums echoed through the streets as the people celebrated the coming matches. He thought of Astarion 4, of the dust and smoke he had left behind. He thought of his fallen comrades in the wars, of the times humanity had been mocked and underestimated. He thought of Kalira's vow, spoken in laughter, yet heard in every corner of the galaxy. Tomorrow, he would step into the arena. Tomorrow, the galaxy would watch. He did not know if he would win, but he knew one thing: he would not fall easily. He would fight until his last breath, and in doing so, he would show them all what it meant to be human. Ethan closed his eyes and whispered to himself, steady and firm, "Tomorrow, the real challenge begins." The morning sun rose over Valeria, painting the towers of the capital in gold and silver. The city was alive with excitement. From every corner of the empire, people had come to watch the tournament. The arena, a vast circle of stone and crystal, shone like a jewel at the heart of the city. Inside, thousands of voices echoed together, a roar that could be heard for miles. Flags of the empire waved, instruments played, and vendors called out food and drink to the endless stream of spectators. It was not just a tournament. It was a festival, a celebration of strength, and at the center of it all was one name: Kalira, the undefeated princess. The arena awakens. The arena floor was wide, made of polished stone that reflected the twin suns. Holographic shields shimmered around its edges to protect the audience from stray strikes. At the far end stood the great gates where challengers entered, and opposite them was the royal platform where Kalira would descend. When the drums began, the crowd fell into rhythm, stomping their feet, clapping their hands, chanting her name. Kalira, Kalira, Kalira. The princess appeared in her silver armor, gleaming in the light. Her long dark hair flowed behind her, and her violet eyes swept across the arena. She moved with confidence, every step carrying the weight of her reputation. She raised her hand, and the crowd thundered with approval. To them, today was just another victory waiting to happen. Kalira smiled, sharp and amused. The human's entrance, at the opposite gate, the doors creaked open. The crowd turned, expecting to see a towering alien warrior or a machine-enhanced fighter. Instead, a single human stepped into the light, Ethan Cross. He wore no shining armor, only simple combat gear, light, flexible, built for speed rather than power. His face was calm, his eyes steady. There was no arrogance in his steps, no showmanship. Only focus. The crowd laughed. A human? He won't last a heartbeat. Why do they even allow this? The laughter echoed across the arena, but Ethan did not react. His gaze was fixed on Kalira, and his steps were steady as he crossed to the center of the ring. From her platform, Kalira tilted her head, curious. "So, you are the human who calls himself Ethan Cross," she said, her voice carrying through the amplifiers. "Do you know what you face?" Ethan's answer was calm. "I know enough." The crowd roared with laughter again, but Kalira only smiled wider. "Very well," she said, stepping forward. "Let us see how long you last." The battle begins, the Ubiwenda. Drums struck 3 times and the duel began. Kalira moved first, her body a blur of speed. She closed the distance in an instant, her spear slicing through the air with deadly precision. Ethan barely managed to dodge, the tip grazing his shoulder as he rolled aside. The crowd cheered, already tasting his defeat. But Ethan did not fall. He came to his feet quickly, eyes sharp, body ready. He had expected speed, and now he had measured it. Kalira pressed forward, her spear spinning in her hands. Each strike was powerful, fast, designed to crush opponents quickly. Ethan dodged, stepped back, rolled under her swings. He did not try to meet her strength head-on. He endured. Minutes passed, and still he stood. The crowd began to shift. Their laughter faded into murmurs. Few challengers had lasted this long without being thrown aside. Kalira narrowed her eyes. Not bad. For a human. Testing each other, Ethan did not reply. He breathed steadily, his movements controlled. He studied her patterns, the way she shifted her weight before a thrust, the slight pause when she spun her spear. Every motion told him something. Kalira, in turn, studied him. Unlike other challengers, he did not panic or grow desperate. His calm unsettled her. He was not fighting to impress the crowd. He was fighting to survive, and to win. She attacked again, faster, harder. Ethan ducked, sidestepped, using the arena's wide floor to keep distance. Once he struck back, a quick blow with his fist to her armored side. It did little damage, but it proved he could find openings. The crowd gasped. A human had landed a hit on their princess. Kalira laughed. Not with mockery, but with genuine excitement. Good. At last, a challenger with spirit. The human's strategy, Ethan knew he could not match her strength. Her strikes shook the ground. Her speed was like lightning, and her endurance seemed endless. But he had something else. Patience. He let her drive the pace, let her exhaust her energy with powerful attacks. Each time she missed, each time she struck air, it cost her a little more. His body ached from close calls, his arms bruised, his chest burning from near hits. But he refused to break. He remembered the wars, the hopeless battles, the times when survival itself was victory. He told himself now what he told his soldiers then: endure, adapt, outlast. The turning point, Kalira grew impatient. No opponent had lasted this long, and it stirred both her pride and her excitement. She wanted to end it with a display of power. Raising her spear high, she called upon the technique that had finished dozens before. Her silver markings glowed, bright as she spun forward, a blur of light and steel. The crowd rose to their feet, certain the match was over. Ethan braced. He saw the strike coming, faster than anything before. For a heartbeat, time slowed. He could not dodge fully, not without losing his chance. So he did something no one expected. He stepped into the strike. The spear grazed his side, burning pain through his ribs, but in that instant he was close enough. With all his strength, he drove his fist upward into Kalira's jaw, using her own momentum against her. The impact echoed like thunder. Kalyra stumbled back, her eyes wide in shock. The arena fell silent. A human had struck the princess down. The crowd reacts. For a long moment, no one moved. The crowd stared in disbelief. Then voices rose, shouting, gasping, arguing. Impossible! He hit her! How did he do that? On the royal platform, even Kalyra's guards shifted uneasily. No one had ever seen her forced back like this. Kalyra touched her jaw, then looked at Ethan. Her lips curled into a slow smile. Interesting, she said softly. Very interesting. Respect in battle. The duel was not over. Kalyra straightened, her spear spinning once more. Her pride had been touched, but instead of anger, she felt excitement. For the first time in years, someone had surprised her. You are no ordinary human, she said. Tell me your name again. Ethan Cross, he replied, steady though his side burned with pain. Ethan Cross, she repeated, as if testing the sound. Then fight me, Ethan Cross. Fight me with everything. You have. She lunged again, faster than before. Ethan met her eyes, and though his body was battered, his spirit burned brighter than ever. The clash of worlds had truly begun. The battle continues. The duel stretched on, longer than any in Kalyra's memory. Blow after blow shook the arena, sparks flying from the clash of steel and flesh. Ethan bled, his clothes torn, but his movements remained sharp, each dodge and counter carefully measured. The crowd no longer laughed. They were silent, watching with wide eyes as the human endured strike after strike. Kalyra, though still dominant, felt her heart race with exhilaration. For the first time, she was not merely winning, she was fighting. And Ethan, though on the edge of collapse, refused to fall. His eyes never wavered, his will was unbroken. The end of the day. The match was called before either could finish it. The judges, seeing the human still standing after so long, declared it unfinished and promised a rematch. The crowd roared with disbelief, but the decision stood. Ethan staggered back to his quarters, every muscle aching, his side bleeding. But he felt no defeat. He had proven something today. Humans could endure, humans could fight, and even the great Kalyra could be touched. In her palace, Kalyra sat in silence, remembering the moment his fist had struck her jaw. She touched the faint bruise and laughed quietly to herself. The days after Ethan's first duel with Kalyra shook the Empire. Everywhere people spoke of the human who had lasted longer than any challenger before. Some called him lucky. Others said it was a trick, a mistake, a moment Kalyra would not allow again. But many whispered something new, that perhaps humans were not as weak as everyone believed. Kalyra's thoughts in her palace. Kalyra trained harder than ever. She replayed the fight in her mind, again and again. The way Ethan had moved, the way he had endured, the way he had stepped into her strongest strike instead of running from it. It unsettled her, but it also thrilled her. All her life, she had crushed her opponents. They came with arrogance, with weapons, with power, and all of them had fallen. But Ethan had not come with arrogance. He came with calm, with patience, with unshakable will. For the first time in years, Kalyra felt anticipation. She wanted the rematch. She wanted to face the human again, not because of her vow, not because of pride, but because deep inside, she wanted to test herself against the fire she had seen in his eyes. Ethan's recovery in the challenger's quarters. Ethan lay on a bed, his ribs wrapped, his body covered in bruises. Pain burned through every breath, but he did not complain. A healer offered him medicine, but he shook his head. Only enough to stand, he said. The rest I'll endure. Other challengers visited him, curious. Some mocked him still, but most were silent, watching him with new respect. They had seen the duel. They had seen him land a blow on Kalyra. That alone made him different. Ethan spent his days walking slowly through the halls, rebuilding his strength. Each night he trained with simple movements, breathing, stepping, striking, not for speed, not for power, but for precision. He knew the rematch would come. He knew Kalira would not hold back. And he knew that this time, only one of them would remain standing at the end. The announcement after 1 week, the Empire announced it. The rematch between Kalira and Ethan Cross would be held in 3 days. The city erupted in excitement. Crowds filled the streets, markets overflowed with traders selling banners and trinkets. Songs were sung of the human challenger, and children played games where one pretended to be Kalira and another pretended to be Ethan. To many, it was still entertainment. But to others it was more. It was proof that even the smallest could challenge the greatest. Ethan, sitting in his quarters, heard the distant songs through the window. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It's not about winning or losing. It's about showing them what we are." The day of the duel, the arena was more crowded than ever before. Not just citizens of Valyria, but visitors from other systems had come to watch. Even members of rival empires sat in the stands, eager to witness the human who had shaken Kalira's pride. The drums began, deep and steady, shaking the air. First came Kalira, descending in her gleaming silver armor, her spear shining in the twin suns. She looked calm, but inside her chest her heart raced with excitement. Then came Ethan. His steps were slower, his body still marked with injuries, but his eyes were steady, his face calm. He carried no weapon, only his fists, his patience, and his will. The crowd roared. The duel begins. The drums struck 3 times and the duel began. Kalira wasted no time. She lunged forward faster than before, her spear slicing with deadly accuracy. Ethan dodged, his body moving with sharp precision. He no longer waited as much as he had before. This time, he answered her strikes with quick counters, forcing her to adjust. The clash echoed through the arena, spear against fist, steel against flesh, speed against endurance. The crowd shouted with every move, their voices a storm around them. Kalira's power. Kalira was stronger, faster, more skilled. She pressed Ethan hard, her strikes shaking the ground. Each swing of her spear carried the weight of years of training, the pride of her people. But Ethan refused to fall. He slipped past her attacks, using her momentum against her, striking in the brief openings she left behind. His blows were not strong enough to defeat her outright, but they slowed her, forced her to respect him. Minutes turned into half an hour. Sweat glistened on both their faces. The crowd grew restless, then amazed as the duel dragged on far longer than anyone expected. Kalira's violet eyes burned with focus. "You're stronger than you look, human," she said between breaths. Ethan's answer was quiet but firm. "Not stronger, just stubborn," she laughed even as she struck again. "Then let's see how far stubbornness can take you." Ethan's struggle pain filled Ethan's body. His ribs screamed with every breath. His arms trembled from blocking her strikes, his legs felt like stone. But he pushed forward, step by step. He remembered his comrades from the war, the ones who had fought beside him. He remembered the worlds, where humans had been abandoned, the times they had been mocked, the times they had been told they would fail. Each memory became strength. Each scar became fuel. He would not fall. Not yet. The final exchange, Kalira felt it too. The end was near. She could not let the duel stretch forever. She raised her spear high, silver patterns glowing bright across her skin. The air shimmered with power. The crowd gasped. They knew what was coming. Her ultimate technique, the strike that had ended every battle before. Ethan steadied himself. His vision blurred, his body swayed, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. He knew he could not dodge. Not fully. But he also knew this was his one chance. Kalira leapt, her spear spinning in a storm of light. Ethan stepped forward. He let the strike pierce across his shoulder, pain exploding through him. But in that instant he drove his fist forward with everything he had left. His blow struck her chest just beneath her armor, with perfect timing and precision. The impact sent a shockwave across the arena. Kalira staggered, her spear slipping from her grasp. She fell to one knee, eyes wide with shock. Ethan stood before her, swaying, bleeding, but still on his feet. The arena was silent. The defeat of the princess, for the first time in her life, Kalira had been struck down. Not by a stronger enemy, not by a machine, but by a human. Slowly, she raised her head and looked at Ethan. And then, to the shock of all, she laughed. A deep, genuine laugh, filled with respect. "Well fought," she said. Her voice carried through the silence of the arena. "Ethan Cross, why, you have defeated me." The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted in disbelief, others cheered wildly, others wept. The impossible had happened. A human had defeated the princess of Valyria. Respect. Earned Kalira rose to her feet slowly, still smiling. She picked up her spear and planted it in the ground before Ethan. Then she bowed her head slightly, a gesture of honor never given lightly. "I am Kalira, princess of the Ziyari, and today I was defeated by a human. Let the galaxy remember this." Ethan, exhausted, could barely remain standing, but he gave a small nod in return. The drums thundered, the banners waved, and the arena filled with cries that shook the sky. The end of the duel that night, the galaxy changed. News spread across every system, every colony, every empire. The human, Ethan Cross, had defeated Kalira. Some called it a miracle, others called it destiny. But for humans, it was something greater. It was proof. Proof that they were not weak, not fragile, not lesser. In her palace, Kalira touched the faint mark on her chest where Ethan's strike had landed. Instead of anger, she felt admiration. Her vow had been made in laughter, but now it carried weight. And soon, she would honor it. The arena was still alive with energy, long after the final strike. The crowd had cheered until their voices were hoarse, yet no sound could fully capture the awe that filled the air. Everywhere, eyes were wide, mouths open, hearts pounding, for, the first time, a human had not only survived the princess's skill but had defeated her outright. That human was Ethan Cross, a name that would be remembered across the stars. The princess honors. Her word Kalira stood tall on the arena floor, her silver armor still gleaming under the twin suns. She touched the place where Ethan's decisive strike had landed, a mark that was more than just a bruise. It was proof that humanity had strength of spirit, determination, and courage. She raised her voice so the crowd could hear. "Ethan Cross," she said, her tone steady, commanding, yet warm. "You have done what no warrior has ever done. You have defeated me, the champion of the Ziyari, and I will honor my vow." The crowd gasped. Murmurs filled the arena. She said her vow, Kalira continued, ignoring the chatter. "As I promised, the one who defeats me shall be my chosen. And so, I declare before all the galaxy, Ethan Cross shall stand beside me." Even the guards and royal advisors were stunned. They had never expected a human to win, much less be granted such honor. Kalira's decision was bold, but it carried sincerity and respect that resonated across the empire. Ethan's response, Ethan, still breathing heavily from the duel, steadied himself. Pain burned through his body, yet pride and calm held him upright. He had expected nothing. He had fought for honor, not glory, and certainly not for a reward. He bowed slightly before Kalira, eyes meeting hers. "Princess," he said softly, "I accept your words, not as a prize, but as proof that humanity can rise to meet the impossible." Kalira's violet eyes softened. She lowered her spear and extended a hand. It was not a gesture of conquest, but of alliance. Ethan took it. In that simple handshake, the battlefield tension melted into mutual respect. Two warriors from different worlds had met, clashed, and learned from one another. Celebration across the empire. News of the victory and the princess's vow spread quickly through Valyria and beyond. Markets erupted in celebration. Songs were composed in Ethan's honor, and children played as if they were humans challenging aliens in the arena. Humans in other colonies, who had been laughed at and underestimated for centuries, celebrated with quiet pride. For once, the galaxy had recognized the strength of their spirit. Ethan walked through the streets of Valyria, escorted by Kalira herself. People stopped to stare, to cheer, to record holograms and broadcasts. He did not smile at the attention. He only walked steadily, aware of the responsibility that had now been placed upon him. Kalira, beside him, moved with grace and authority. Yet for the first time, she walked not as a conqueror, but as a partner. Together they made an unlikely but striking pair, human and Ziyari, equal and united. A moment of reflection. That night, Kalira and Ethan stood on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the glowing city. Twin suns had set, leaving a sky full of stars. The people below still celebrated, but up here there was calm. Kalira broke the silence. I have fought many battles, faced countless warriors, yet none have challenged me like you did. You are human, yet your spirit carries the strength of many. Ethan nodded slowly. It's what humans do. We endure, we adapt, and we fight. Not just with our bodies, but with our will. Kalira smiled, a rare softness in her expression. Then perhaps I underestimated humanity. Not anymore. And not just you, Ethan. Every human now has a place in my respect. The two stood side by side watching the city. In that moment a bond formed, not of obligation, not of chance, but of mutual understanding and admiration. Building an alliance. The days that followed were filled with ceremonies and formal introductions. Ethan was recognized not only as Kalira's chosen but also as a representative of humanity in Valyria. The two worked together to foster new relationships between humans and Ziyari. Trade routes expanded, technology exchanges began, and scholars from both worlds shared knowledge freely. It was more than just a personal bond. It was a bridge between two species that had long been strangers. Where humans were once dismissed as weak, they now held a presence in the heart of one of the galaxy's greatest empires. Ethan never sought power or control. His influence came from respect earned on the battlefield and from his unwavering commitment to humanity. He became a symbol of what humans could achieve when given a chance. The princess and the human Kalira and Ethan trained together daily. She taught him the techniques of Ziyari combat, while he shared strategies born from human wars and adaptability. They sparred not as teacher and student, but as equals, learning from each other, challenging one another, and growing stronger together. Their bond extended beyond combat. They shared stories of home, of victories and losses, of what it meant to survive and endure. Kalira learned the depth of human resilience. Ethan learned the pride and honor of the Ziyari. In quiet moments, they walked among the people of Valyria, blending with the crowd, laughing at simple jokes and sharing meals with citizens. The galaxy watched this friendship and alliance with wonder. A legacy begins. Months passed. The story of Ethan Cross and Kalira became legend. It was no longer a tale of one duel or one vow. It became a story of humanity's spirit, of courage, facing impossible odds, and of respect earned across worlds. Aliens who had once dismissed humans now approached them with curiosity and admiration. Trade, diplomacy, and exploration increased. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were partners, recognized and valued. Kalira, once proud and unapproachable, now walked the galaxy with a new perspective. She had seen the fire of human will, and it had changed her forever. Ethan, the man from a small mining colony, became a symbol that strength comes in many forms. Not just in muscle or weapons, but in courage, patience, and determination. The promise one evening, as twin moons rose over Valyria, Kalira and Ethan stood at the palace's highest balcony. You have changed my life, Kalira said softly, her hand brushing against his. And perhaps together we can change the galaxy. Ethan nodded. We will. Not by force, but by showing them what we can do together. Humans and Ziyari alike. Kalira smiled, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. Then let the galaxy remember. This day, let them see what happens when respect and courage meet. The stars above twinkled as if the universe itself acknowledged the bond. From that day forward, humanity and the Ziyari walked together, not as conquerors and subjects, but as allies, partners, and equals. And at the center of it all were two warriors who had found in each other something far greater than victory or glory: trust, respect, and the promise of a new future. The story that echoed across the stars. Stories of Ethan, Cross, and Kalyra spread far beyond Valyria. Parents told their children about the human who dared to face a princess, and the princess who honored her word. Scholars wrote of the bond between species, and explorers looked to the stars with renewed hope. It was a story of courage and determination. It was a story of laughter that became legend. It was a story of what it truly meant to be human. Ethan and Kalyra's bond endured, a symbol of unity in a galaxy that often underestimated the smallest and the seemingly weak. And in every corner of the stars, humans began to stand taller, their spirit no longer ignored, their strength no longer doubted.